When you think about the idea of a quantum jump, it's easy to imagine something sudden, dramatic, almost explosive, a moment where your entire life bends in a new direction. But the truth is softer, more elegant, and far more natural than the mind typically expects. A quantum jump isn't a leap you force, it's a shift you allow. It's not an act of spiritual aggression, but an unfolding that happens the moment your inner world becomes ready for the next version of you to rise. The journey begins long before the shift shows any external signs. It begins in the quiet spaces inside you, the parts of your being that you rarely speak about but feel deeply. Moments when your soul whispers that there is something more, something your current reality cannot hold. Most people sense this intuitive pull long before they know how to respond to it. They feel a subtle restlessness, a longing, a quiet knowing that they have outgrown the life they're living. It's the kind of feeling that arrives during sleepless nights or in the middle of an ordinary day when everything suddenly feels slightly misaligned, like a room you've known forever but no longer feel at home in. This is the first sign of a natural quantum jump preparing to occur. The shift is already underway the moment you begin to question whether you belong in the old version of your life. The gap between where you are and where you're meant to be doesn't widen because you're failing. It widens because your soul is stretching toward a higher timeline. And this stretch, though it can feel uncomfortable, is the clearest signal that transformation is near. Many people try to force their way into a new reality. They repeat affirmations with tension in their chest, visualize with pressure behind their eyes, or demand the universe to respond on their schedule. But forced manifestation comes from fear, not alignment. It comes from a silent belief that the life you desire won't come unless you push, chase, or struggle for it. This is the mindset of the old self, the version of you that believes survival depends on control. But a natural quantum jump doesn't bloom from tension. It emerges from coherence, from the inner harmony that arises when thought, emotion, and identity begin to vibrate in the same direction. When you stop clinging to the version of yourself that the world shaped, and begin softening into the version your soul has been quietly nurturing, the shift happens almost effortlessly. You don't climb into a new reality, you rise into it because your frequency aligns with a new set of outcomes. Think of it like tuning a radio. You cannot force a station into clarity by gripping the dial tighter. You only find the right frequency by relaxing the static and allowing the signal to emerge. Reality works the same way. Your life shifts the moment your inner frequency becomes a match for the life trying to reach you. In this introduction, we begin by remembering that the old self is not an enemy. It is simply familiar. And in its familiarity, it often resists change, even when change is the very thing you desire. The old self clings to routines, emotions, and identity structures that feel predictable, even if they are painful. It will tell you stories about safety, stability, or waiting for the right moment. But these narratives are illusions built from memory, not potential. The new self, however, operates from possibility. It draws its energy from the timeline where you are already living a more aligned life. It communicates through intuition, through microsparks of inspiration, through inner clarity that arrives without explanation. The new self never demands, it invites. Its voice is gentle but persistent. It nudges you toward new decisions, new environments, and new habits that feel strangely natural, almost as if you've lived them before. The transition between these two selves, the familiar self and the emergent self, is where the natural quantum jump occurs. And contrary to what many believe, you don't have to abandon the old self with force. You simply stop feeding it with fear. You stop repeating its stories. You stop collapsing into its doubts. And slowly, the energy that once sustained your past begins to retrieve itself, becoming available for the timeline that's calling your name. As you listen to the upcoming sections, imagine this introduction as the opening of a doorway. Not one you must walk through with urgency, but one that is already open, waiting for your frequency to rise to its threshold. Everything you want, from deeper peace to greater abundance to a transformed identity, is already encoded in the field around you. The natural quantum jump is the moment you stop gripping your life from the outside and begin allowing your life to evolve from the inside. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is this: the shift you're seeking is not something distant. It is already in motion. It has been building quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment your inner world relaxes into the version of you that was always meant to emerge. This journey is not about becoming someone new, it's about returning to the self you were always designed to become. To understand how a natural quantum jump unfolds, it's essential first to grasp the subtle mechanics behind it. Unlike sudden, dramatic transformations often portrayed in popular culture, quantum shifts are not about forcing outcomes or manipulating reality from the outside. They occur because the inner world, the unseen architecture of thoughts, beliefs, and emotions, has aligned to a frequency that allows new possibilities to flow effortlessly into life. In other words, the jump is less about action and more about resonance. Your external circumstances are merely reflections of the vibrational state you occupy internally. Think for a moment about how nature works. A seed does not push against the soil to become a tree. It waits, germinates, and grows according to conditions: sunlight, water, and nourishment. Similarly, your reality does not shift because of sheer willpower alone. It changes when the environment of your consciousness becomes ripe. And this ripeness is cultivated through subtle, often invisible, adjustments in how you think, feel, and inhabit your own being. The micro changes that occur inside you are what eventually produce macro changes in the world around you. A key aspect of this process is the contrast between forcing and allowing. When you attempt to manifest or shift by sheer effort, tension arises. Thoughts tighten, emotions spike, and identity becomes rigid, all of which act like interference on the frequency you are trying to tune into. Forcing creates resistance, and resistance disrupts resonance. On the other hand, allowing is a gentle practice of softening, noticing, and becoming coherent with the vibration of the life you wish to experience. Allowing does not mean passivity, it means alignment. It means embodying the reality you want before it appears externally, trusting that the universe responds to your internal state rather than your external pressure. The principle of frequency matching lies at the heart of this understanding. Everything in existence vibrates, including your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. When your internal vibration harmonizes with a timeline that already contains your desired outcomes, the external world begins to reflect that alignment. It's not magic or wishful thinking. It is a natural, observable energetic law. When your vibration is low, scattered, or conflicted, the timelines you attract will mirror that chaos. When your vibration rises into clarity, confidence, and resonance, the universe presents circumstances that match this elevated state. Another fundamental element of the natural quantum jump is identity softening. Most people approach change from a mindset of, I must become something I am not. They cling to who they think they should be and force themselves into roles or behaviors that feel unnatural. True quantum shifts, however, begin with a release of rigid identity structures. This doesn't mean losing yourself. It means dropping the unnecessary layers that have been imposed by past conditioning, societal expectations, or fear. The new self emerges not through fabrication but through reclamation, the rediscovery of a version of you that has always existed in potential. Emotional neutrality also plays a critical role. Many seekers think that desire, excitement, or even desperation is the fuel for a shift. While emotions are powerful signals, unbalanced or chaotic emotional energy can create friction in the process. When you learn to maintain calm, present-centered awareness and steady emotional resonance, you create a field in which transformation can naturally occur. It's like tuning a fine instrument. Tension in the strings produces noise, but gentle precision brings perfect pitch. The quantum jump is the life version of that perfect pitch. Your internal state calibrated to the exact frequency of your next reality. Cognitive clarity is another subtle, yet vital component. Thoughts operate like signals. Confused, contradictory, or negative thinking generates interference, making it nearly impossible to access a new timeline. When you cultivate conscious awareness over your inner dialogue, when you notice and shift limiting patterns of thinking, your mind becomes a clear lens through which the next reality can manifest. The act of observing your own thoughts without judgment is transformative in itself, because it breaks cycles of unconscious sabotage. You begin to inhabit a state of presence where the new reality can emerge naturally. The interplay between thought, emotion, and identity creates the invisible scaffold of your quantum jump. Each element must harmonize for the shift to happen effortlessly. Think of it as a three-part symphony. Your mind sets the theme, your emotions create the resonance, and your identity holds the structure. When these three components are coherent, the universe cannot help but respond. The shift occurs not because you are desperate or pushing, but because your inner alignment has created a path of least resistance. The universe does not resist a coherent field. It supports it, folding circumstances, people, and opportunities into your reality as if they were always waiting for you to arrive. Understanding the mechanics also reveals why impatience or doubt is so counterproductive. A natural quantum jump cannot be rushed because timing is intrinsic to the process. Just as the seed cannot force the sun to rise, your shift cannot bypass the necessary internal calibration. Trying to speed it up by overthinking, overdoing, or overanalyzing only reinforces the old self and its attachment to struggle. The natural jump, in contrast, unfolds when you trust the process and allow the inner work to precede the outer manifestation. Finally, it is vital to recognize that every micro-adjustment inside you is already creating ripples across multiple timelines. Even when nothing appears to change externally, the internal alignment is silently reweaving the fabric of your reality. Your thoughts, emotions, and identity are not isolated, they are dynamic forces interacting with a multiverse of possibilities. When coherence is achieved, the universe orchestrates events, encounters, and synchronicities that make the external change inevitable. The natural quantum jump is therefore both a process and a destination. It begins inside and emerges outside, seamlessly when alignment is reached. By understanding this subtle interplay of resonance, identity, and emotional harmony, you begin to see that quantum shifts are not elusive phenomena reserved for the chosen few. They are natural occurrences that happen to anyone willing to cultivate alignment rather than force, presence rather than control, and coherence rather than tension. The knowledge itself is transformative because it reframes the journey from struggle to flow. When you internalize this understanding, the path to your new reality begins to feel less like a battle and more like an inevitable, elegant unfolding. Even when the principles of natural quantum jumps are understood, many seekers find themselves stuck, waiting for change that never seems to fully arrive. The reason is subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. Hidden blocks within the psyche and energy field prevent the shift from happening naturally. These blocks are not external obstacles, they are internal patterns, often unconscious, that act like anchors holding the old self in place. Understanding these hidden blocks is essential, because once they are recognized, they can be gently dissolved, allowing the new timeline to emerge without force. The first block is identity rigidity. This is the tendency to cling to the familiar self, the version of you that has been shaped by past experiences, societal conditioning, and repeated patterns of thought and behavior. The old self finds comfort in repetition, even when repetition is painful or limiting. It resists change because it interprets uncertainty as danger, believing that sticking to the familiar, no matter how small or restrictive, is safer than stepping into the unknown. Identity rigidity manifests in subtle ways: self-doubt when considering a new path, hesitation to adopt new habits, or a sense of "I'm not ready" that quietly undermines progress. The rigid self believes that transformation is something outside, something to be earned or achieved, rather than an internal alignment to what is already possible. Until this rigidity softens, the quantum jump remains out of reach. The new self is always trying to emerge, but it cannot fully manifest until the old self releases its grip. The second block is emotional resistance. Most people underestimate how much emotional patterns dictate reality. Fear, guilt, resentment, and unprocessed trauma create a dense energetic field that clouds perception and creates misalignment. Emotional resistance often masquerades as rational thought: "I can't do this because it's risky," or "I've failed too many times to try again." Beneath these statements lies the weight of old emotional wounds, holding you in a lower vibrational state. When you attempt to shift reality while carrying unresolved emotions, the energy of the old timeline acts like a gravitational pull, preventing the emergence of new circumstances. The new self, in contrast, moves with emotional fluidity. It does not ignore feelings but processes them, releasing the energy that binds the old reality, and allowing the heart to resonate with possibility rather than fear. Emotional resistance is particularly insidious because it often operates below conscious awareness, quietly sabotaging alignment even when the mind intellectually understands the shift. Recognizing and releasing these patterns is one of the most crucial steps to allow the quantum jump to occur naturally. The third hidden block is cognitive distortion. Thoughts are not just fleeting mental events, they are energetic blueprints that interact with the field of possibilities around you. Cognitive distortions, patterns like catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, or discounting positive experiences, create interference in the resonance needed for a natural shift. For example, when you constantly tell yourself that change is impossible, or that opportunities will never align, you are energetically programming your reality to match that belief. The mind becomes a filter, narrowing the scope of timelines that can be accessed. Even subtle doubts, repeated over time, generate a barrier between the current self and the emergent self. The quantum jump requires mental clarity, the ability to observe thoughts without being swept into them, and the courage to release old narratives that no longer serve your evolution. Without this cognitive alignment, all efforts toward shifting reality become diluted, like trying to tune a radio while the station is constantly blocked by static. Each of these three blocks, identity rigidity, emotional resistance, and cognitive distortion, operates in tandem, often reinforcing one another. A rigid identity may resist emotional growth, while emotional resistance feeds distorted thinking patterns, creating a feedback loop that keeps the old self entrenched. The contrast here is vivid. The old self fights to maintain a sense of security and continuity, while the emergent self is quietly calling for expansion, new experiences, and alignment with higher possibility. The tension between these two forces is often experienced as frustration, stagnation, or subtle anxiety. The more a person tries to force the jump without addressing these blocks, the more the old self digs in, creating a paradox. Wanting change while unconsciously holding on to the conditions that prevent it. Recognizing these blocks requires a shift in perspective. It is not about labeling yourself as flawed or stuck. Instead, it is about observing these patterns with the curiosity of a scientist and the compassion of a spiritual guide. Awareness itself begins to weaken the hold of these hidden obstacles. When you notice the moments you hesitate, the fears that surface, or the stories your mind tells you to justify staying small, you are planting the seeds of freedom. Simply acknowledging the presence of these blocks begins the process of dissolving them. This is the first gentle step toward creating an inner environment conducive to a quantum jump. The process of dissolving these blocks is subtle, gradual, and deeply transformative. Identity rigidity can be softened through practices that expand self-perception, such as meditation, reflective journaling, or visualizing the new self inhabiting daily life. Emotional resistance dissolves when emotions are felt fully and released without judgment, allowing the energy trapped in the past to dissipate and flow into new timelines. Cognitive distortion can be addressed by cultivating mindfulness over thoughts, challenging limiting beliefs, and retraining the mind to notice opportunities and possibilities that were previously invisible. Each adjustment does not need to be dramatic. Even micro-changes, when sustained, create profound shifts in the vibrational field. The art of allowing the quantum jump is less about doing and more about being. It is a practice in which you cultivate a state of alignment so profound that the next version of your life has no choice but to emerge. Most seekers, when they hear the word allow, misunderstand it as passivity or inaction. But allowing is an active engagement with presence, a conscious surrender to the flow of life while remaining anchored in your inner authority. It is the delicate balance between trust and awareness, between releasing control and embodying clarity, where the magic of transformation naturally unfolds. To enter this state, one must first learn to quiet the mind. The relentless chatter, the planning, the compulsive analysis, these are the voices of the old self attempting to maintain control. By cultivating stillness, whether through meditation, mindful breathing, or simply observing the present moment without judgment, you create space for the new timeline to emerge. This stillness is not emptiness. It is a fertile field of potential, a receptive ground where unseen energies can reorganize themselves into a reality aligned with your highest vibration. The act of being still is a declaration to the universe: I am ready to receive, I am aligned, and I am coherent. Breathing plays a central role in this practice. Each conscious breath becomes a rhythm that anchors you in the present while subtly shifting your energy. Inhale with awareness, filling the body with light and possibility. Exhale tension, resistance, and doubt. Over time, the breath acts like a tuning fork, calibrating your frequency to the resonance of the reality you wish to inhabit. This simple, embodied practice illustrates a core principle of natural quantum jumps. Transformation begins in the subtle energy of your body, not only in your thoughts or external circumstances. When your nervous system learns to trust and relax, your entire field becomes conducive to alignment. Surrender is another essential element. Surrender does not mean giving up or resigning yourself to the whims of life. It means releasing the need to control the precise timing or form of the outcome. The new self already exists in potential, and the universe knows the perfect way to bring it forth. By releasing attachment to specific results, you allow the intelligence of the cosmos to operate freely, orchestrating synchronicities, opportunities, and encounters that your limited mind could never plan. In this state, life itself becomes a collaborator rather than a series of obstacles. Surrendering in this way is not passive. It is profoundly active because it requires trust, patience, and consistent inner alignment. Embodiment is a third key principle. It is not enough to think about the version of you that you wish to become or to imagine the life you wish to inhabit. You must feel it, move as if it is already true, speak as if it is already unfolding, and make decisions from the perspective of the new self. This is where the distinction between forced manifestation and natural alignment becomes clear. The old self tries to imitate the desired life from the outside in, while the emergent self embodies it from the inside out. By inhabiting this internal reality, You send a clear signal to the universe that the shift is ready to occur. Embodiment bridges the gap between thought and reality, transforming abstract desire into living experience. Another subtle yet profound aspect of allowing is cultivating emotional spaciousness. The new self moves through life with emotional fluidity, able to hold multiple states without collapsing into fear, doubt, or frustration. When you encounter challenges or apparent delays, emotional spaciousness allows you to maintain coherence rather than contracting into tension. This does not mean ignoring feelings or pretending everything is perfect. It means observing emotions, processing them fully, and letting them move without anchoring you in past patterns or limiting beliefs. In this way, your emotional state becomes a river rather than a reservoir, flowing freely toward the next timeline. Gratitude and presence further enhance the field of allowing. By noticing and appreciating even the smallest aspects of your current reality, you raise your vibration and signal receptivity. Gratitude is not a tool to force change. It is a natural amplifier of resonance, reinforcing alignment with abundance rather than lack. Presence, similarly, keeps you grounded in the moment where the shift is actually happening. A quantum jump is not a distant future event. It is the unfolding of the now into a new configuration. By anchoring in presence, you allow the universe to deliver the next step in perfect timing, without interference from expectation or impatience. Visualization and subtle imagination can also support the process, not as a means of controlling outcomes, but as a method of deep internal alignment. When you visualize the life you wish to inhabit, focus not on forcing external scenarios but on feeling into the sensory and emotional experience of the new reality. Imagine how it would feel to move, speak, think, and exist as the emergent self. The key is to do this lightly, like dipping into a stream rather than trying to hold water in your hands. When imagination becomes a tool of resonance rather than pressure, it harmonizes your internal frequency with the life waiting for you. Finally, trust is the binding force of allowing. The universe operates according to principles far greater than the mind can comprehend. Trust is not blind faith. It is recognition that the internal alignment you cultivate is sufficient to draw the appropriate circumstances, people, and experiences into your reality. Each time you choose alignment over struggle, softening over tension, and presence over expectation, you reinforce this trust. The act of allowing becomes not a single moment, but a continuous practice of internal calibration, an ongoing dance between the self you are releasing and the self you are stepping into. The art of allowing, in its fullness, creates an environment where the quantum jump cannot help but happen. As we draw this journey to a close, it is essential to remember that the quantum jump you have been exploring is not a distant destination or a reward to be earned through struggle. It is a natural unfolding, quietly waiting for your inner world to rise into alignment. Every thought you've examined, every emotional pattern you've softened, and every layer of identity you've released has been preparing the field for this shift. The power of the quantum jump lies not in external circumstance, but in the internal coherence you have cultivated, the harmony between thought, emotion, and identity that allows the universe to mirror back the life you are ready to embody. The contrast between the old self and the emergent self, which we explored throughout this journey, is not a battle to be fought but a doorway to be walked through. The old self may linger, whispering fears, doubts, and memories of past limitations, but these are simply signposts, markers of the areas that need gentle attention and realignment. The emergent self, on the other hand, is already present in potential, vibrating at the frequency of a life filled with possibility, alignment, and fulfillment. Your role is not to force this emergence but to allow it, to soften, trust, and embody the essence of who you are becoming. As you step into this new space, notice how the world begins to respond in ways that feel effortless, as if it has been waiting for you to recognize your readiness. Synchronicities occur, decisions become clearer, and opportunities that once seemed invisible or impossible appear naturally, drawn to the resonance of your inner field. This is the universe reflecting the alignment you have cultivated, confirming that the natural quantum jump is not a single moment, but a continuous unfolding, a dance between the self you have released and the self you are stepping into. The most profound truth of all is that the shift you seek is not somewhere in the future. It exists now, quietly taking form within your consciousness, waiting for your trust and presence to allow it to fully manifest. Every breath you take, every moment of stillness, and every choice to release tension and align with your true self accelerates this emergence. Transformation is no longer something to chase, it becomes something to inhabit. The doorway has always been open, you are simply learning to step through it without resistance. As you leave this space, carry with you the awareness that the quantum jump is a reflection of your own inner evolution. Your life, in all its complexity and beauty, is responding to the coherence you cultivate inside. The old self need not be fought, the future need not be forced, and the path need not be complicated. By softening, trusting, and allowing, you give space for the emergent self to inhabit reality naturally. And in this surrender, you discover the subtle, luminous truth that the life you desire is already encoded in the field around you, awaiting only your readiness to fully embody it. Step gently into this knowing, carry it into every thought, choice, and moment, and allow the natural quantum jump to unfold as effortless, elegant, and inevitable as the rising of the sun.